Success without sacrifice, rewriting the rules of achievement. Have you ever achieved something impressive only to realize you left pieces of yourself behind to get there? That moment when you're standing at the summit, but you don't recognize the person who made the climb? I recently had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Rashanda Booker, a revolutionary thought leader whose work is transforming how we understand authentic leadership for Black professionals. Dr. Booker isn't just researching these issues, she's living them, breathing them, and creating pathways where none existed before. Her insights cut through the corporate noise with surgical precision, offering not just theory, but practical liberation for those trapped in systems that demand their silence. Today, I'm sharing what I learned from our extraordinary conversation, wisdom that has the power to change not just careers, but lives. Here's a truth that shouldn't be radical, but somehow still is. True success never requires you to sacrifice your mental health, your core identity, or your peace. Let that sink in for a moment. We live in a world that often celebrates the hustle at all costs, the grinding, the pushing through, the whatever it takes mentality, the 4 a.m. wake ups, and the I'll sleep when I'm dead LinkedIn posts. But Dr. Booker challenges us to ask, at what cost? And more importantly, is that cost necessary? The answer, as it turns out, is no, it's not. When I first heard Dr. Booker articulate this, something shifted in me. It was like someone finally named the elephant that's been sitting in countless conference rooms across America, the elephant that whispers to Black professionals, you must be twice as good to get half as far, and you must sacrifice who you are to get there at all. But what if that elephant is wrong? What if success without sacrifice isn't just possible, but necessary? Consider Letitia Clark, founder of the Pink Parachute Diaries podcast. I want you to picture Letitia for a moment, a woman who saw a pattern so disturbing she couldn't look away. Talented Black women being handed pink slips while watching less qualified colleagues float down on golden parachutes. These women weren't just losing jobs, they were losing their voices. Their struggles went unspoken due to fear of being labeled or reinforcing stereotypes. I kept seeing these brilliant women disappearing, Letitia told me, not just from companies, but from themselves. They'd come in vibrant and leave hollow. And the worst part, no one was talking about it. So Letitia did something revolutionary in its simplicity. She created space for truth. She built a platform for authentic storytelling, documenting journeys of resilience so no one would feel alone in their struggle. The podcast fostered connection, healing, validation, and hope by celebrating achievements while acknowledging challenges. What began as one woman's refusal to accept the status quo blossomed into an influential space, amplifying underrepresented voices. It inspired listeners to share their own stories and catalyzed a supportive community across industries. Most importantly, it broke cycles of isolation and sparked wider conversations about workplace equity for Black professionals by turning private pain into public power. This is what happens when we break the silence, when we refuse to accept that success must come at the cost of our authentic selves. Because here's what Dr. Booker helped me understand: isolation and silence can be prisons for Black professionals navigating toxic workplaces. Sharing your truth, even when it feels risky, builds community and transforms wounds into wisdom. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the foundation of collective healing and change. But breaking silence is just the beginning. Let me tell you about Marcus, a marketing executive repeatedly passed over for promotion despite stellar performance reviews. Marcus didn't just suspect bias, he lived it. Every morning, he walked into a building where his excellence was simultaneously exploited and ignored. His organization was quietly rolling back its DEI commitments post pandemic. Part of a disturbing national trend reflected in EEOC reports showing racial discrimination charges rising by 10% among Black professionals. Marcus could have internalized this rejection. He could have questioned his worth or capabilities, as so many do when systems fail them. Instead, he did something both simple and profound. He documented everything, every achievement, every oversight. Every time a less qualified colleague received opportunities he was denied, every subtle bias he encountered over 2 years, building an irrefutable record of both his excellence and the barriers placed before him. When denied promotion again in favor of less qualified colleagues, his documentation allowed him to successfully challenge the decision, securing both his rightful advancement and compensation for lost opportunities. The hardest part wasn't the discrimination, Marcus reflected. It was convincing myself I wasn't crazy for seeing it. As diversity initiatives faded from corporate priorities nationwide after 2020's reckoning with racial justice, many like Marcus found themselves increasingly vulnerable without institutional support. But his story shows us something powerful. In environments where equity isn't guaranteed, documentation becomes your armor against discrimination. Marcus didn't just win his case using detailed records, he inspired peers to do the same through workshops sponsored by advocacy groups like Black Network Exchange. His actions shifted organizational practices around accountability and highlighted how personal resilience plus strategic action can disrupt systemic inequity. This is what protection looks like in practice, not just for ourselves, but for those who will follow in our footsteps. And then there's Christy Lawson's story, perhaps the most profound example of what happens when we refuse to shrink ourselves to fit someone else's definition of success. Like many high achieving Black professionals, Christy felt compelled early in her career to mute aspects of her personality to avoid appearing threatening or emotional, fighting against the angry Black woman trope that haunts so many brilliant minds. I remember the exact moment I decided to stop making myself smaller, Christy shared. I was in a meeting where a white colleague presented my idea as his own and received praise for it. Instead of staying silent, I calmly said, I'm glad you found value in the strategy I shared last week. I'd love to elaborate on it further. The room went silent. That was the day I stopped apologizing for taking up space. She engaged deeply in self reflection while building relationships with allies who valued authenticity over assimilation. She negotiated unapologetically for what she deserved, from pay raises to leadership opportunities, and paid it forward via peer networks focused on empowerment rather than conformity. By standing firmly in her truth instead of shrinking herself down, Christy unlocked new levels of confidence, influence, and impact, both personally and professionally. After years operating under code switching expectations, she realized lasting fulfillment only came from aligning outward actions with inner values. She went on to lead national workshops, helped dozens negotiate better roles, and launched mentorship circles that now span multiple organizations and industries. Her story has inspired ripple effects of change, empowering countless Black professionals to reclaim agency and rewrite narratives around worthiness and workplace belonging. This is what Dr. Booker means when she talks about redefining success on your own terms. It's not just about what you achieve, it's about who you are while achieving it. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, that sounds nice, but my reality is different. My workplace isn't ready for my authentic self. I hear you, and so does Dr. Booker. That's why she emphasizes that intentional communities become your sanctuary for growth and support. Don't go it alone. Connect with others who validate your experiences and uplift your journey. The truth is, we weren't meant to navigate these waters in isolation. When we find or create communities that celebrate our whole selves, we discover resources we never knew existed. We find strength we didn't know we had. So, where do we go from here? What does Dr. Booker's wisdom ask us to do differently? First, reflect honestly on whether any part of your current definition of success requires you to shrink or suffer. If so, that's not success. It's self abandonment disguised as achievement. Second, start documenting both your achievements and the microaggressions you experience at work. This isn't about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. Your documentation becomes both your shield and your evidence. Third, share one piece of your story with someone safe. You'll be surprised at how connection breaks isolation. One vulnerable conversation can be the beginning of healing, not just for you, but for others who thought they were alone. Finally, join or create a network committed not just to surviving, but thriving together. These intentional communities become the soil in which your authentic self can grow without constraint. Because here's what I learned most profoundly from my conversation with Dr. Rashanda Booker. You deserve a career where freedom and fulfillment are non negotiable. Not someday, not after you've paid your dues, right now. The world doesn't just need your talent or your labor, it needs your voice, your perspective, your unfiltered brilliance. And any definition of success that asks you to silence those things isn't success at all, it's surrender. I want you to leave here today with more than inspiration. I want you to leave with permission to question the ladders you've been climbing, to examine the pieces of yourself you've been leaving behind, and to imagine what might be possible if you brought your whole self to your work. Because the revolution we need won't come from climbing existing ladders faster. It will come from building new structures altogether. Structures that honor our humanity, structures that celebrate our differences, structures that allow us all to thrive. So I challenge you, starting today, refuse to accept any definition of success that requires your silence. Document your journey, share your story, build your community, and watch as what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The world is waiting for your uncompromised brilliance, not the muted version, not the acceptable version, the real you in all your complex, magnificent glory. Because when we redefine success on our own terms, when we refuse to sacrifice our authentic selves on the altar of achievement, we don't just transform our own lives, we create new possibilities for everyone who comes after us. And that, my friends, is the greatest achievement of all.